This is the Hagmann and Hagmann report for today. It is Tuesday, a tremendous Tuesday, actually, April 29th, 2014. I'm Doug Hagmann, along with my co-host, my son, fellow investigator, researcher, Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann report. Folks, you're about to hear 3 hours of just truly unbiased, uncensored news, information, analysis, information that you need to know in these very perilous times in which we live. Joe and I are flying solo tonight, with the exception of course, hour number 2, Tuesdays with Stan Dale. Folks, you're listening to the only show where we believe the news is presented to you in 3D. Hey, anybody out there listening to our broadcast create those 3D glasses, manufacture those, for movie theaters and what have you? We need to buy some in lots, in large lots, and pass them out. So when you're looking at the people like BLM agents or whatever type federal agents, you can put your own set on, and actually see them in 3D. I'm not going to say X-ray vision, but you can see through their lies and their disinformation, as we do on this program, see through the lies, disinformation, misinformation, misdirection, and bring you the news behind the news. We broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Our home base on the Internet is HomelandSecurityUS.com. That's HomelandSecurityUS.com. As I mentioned earlier, it's going to come alive here shortly with information, along with CanadaFreePress.com, my contributions there. We've got a lot of things to say. Been hobbled over the last several weeks with a number of things, from family issues to equally important investigations that have been in the works. So watch for that stuff coming out. Folks, we're also simulcast by the Christians United Broadcasting Network. There you can tune us in at the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.com. That's the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.com. You got to spell out the word and then 2 N's on Hagmann. And thank each and every one of you for joining us. It's a deliberate move on your part to listen to us. We understand that. There's other shows you can listen to, and other good shows you can listen to, informative shows, but you've chosen to spend your time here, and for that, in return, we want to offer you our best. Certainly, we are very cognizant of the fact that you put your faith and your trust in us, and we thank you for that. Joe, welcome to tonight. Welcome to the studio this evening.
Glad to be here. Got a lot of stuff to get into tonight, and I think we're going to start with Benghazi, I believe. You have some stuff you want to get into on that. We have also news before Stan comes on, new internet crackdown, internet regulation news that is very important, and a host of other news. If we have time to get into it with Stan in the second hour, we will have a full boat of stories tonight, with or without calls. So with that, let's get right into it.
Well, if I may, folks, and just let me say this. There is an active campaign right now. This has nothing to do with Benghazi. This has nothing to do with anything aside from the truth. There's an active campaign to seed stories, articles, seed as in plant information that's not true. Now, I'm not talking about blackmail or personal information or whatever, but for example, take a story like Benghazi, or take a story like the activities, the land grab at the BLM ranch. Let's use that one, for example. It's interesting how, in fact, let's stick with this account of the BLM ranch raid, and then we see, of course, the federal agents at the Bundy Ranch come out there with sniper rifles and with extreme prejudice, intent, extreme force to take land in use by Mr. Bundy, the grazing of cattle and such. That's the story. The core aspect of that story is the actions of the BLM, the constitutional rights of Cliven Bundy and every member of the Patriot movement that responded to the ranch. Suddenly, folks, we see this news conference. In the news conference, we have Mr. Cliven Bundy come out and was asked a question by a reporter, somebody in the crowd, a very specific question that led him to a very specific, inarticulate answer. That answer, of course, the video of him answering that question, where he used the word Negra, meaning Negro, and referenced the oppression of black people under slavery, in a context which he understood it to be, was edited and then spread by New York Times, Washington Post, and other media outlets. This includes Media Matters, which funded or which was the brainchild behind this operation. And of course, Media Matters is George Soros. Now, connected to George Soros. Now, let me explain something here, folks, if I might. There is a deliberate campaign right now to marginalize the message of the truth patriots, true patriots, truth, and to redirect the focus, the attention onto matters in the periphery, inconsequential matters. This has, and you can see this, and without naming names, although I eventually will, but I don't really have to. I mean, if you pay attention to the alternative media, you can see the people who have jumped ship or who were never on board with the main issue of the constitutional rights of Cliven Bundy and the threat posed by the BLM. In fact, I'm not going to hold back. You know what? Forget it. I'm not going to hold back. For example, you see people like Glenn Beck who have painted Mr. Bundy as unhinged, who have described him as unhinged. That's Glenn Beck and his staff. And then you've seen Mr. Glenn Beck go after Alex Jones. Joe's looking at me like, "Are you serious?"
I'm just looking.
Okay. Well, okay. Do you see what's happening here, folks? There is a deliberate attempt to marginalize the people who are attempting to uphold constitutional rights and to keep the argument, to keep the topic of conversation technically, verbally accurate, to keep it accurate with respect to the topic. And then we see these others who are out there and moving, intentionally, deliberately taking the conversation into a different direction, taking the focus off the real issue. This is important for people to understand, because here is the lesson, or here is where we're at, in my estimation, at this point on the 29th of April 2014. At this point, we are going to be forced to choose sides. And I'm not talking about wimpy sides. I'm not talking about being politically correct or feeling like we must be politically correct. And this is going to dovetail, what I'm saying is going to dovetail directly into Joe's research. The script for tonight with respect to Benghazi, we'll touch on it peripherally, but we're going to focus on what Joe is focusing on as well, because this kind of goes right into this. But here's the deal. Folks, you and I, Joe and I, and others are going to have to choose sides. Which side are we going to be on? And there's only one side, actually, and that's the side of truth. Now, you know, I like, or had liked, I should say, Glenn Beck's message. there were some issues that we did not agree with. Of course, I didn't agree with him on, and certainly conversationally, there were some discussions not with Mr. Beck in particular, although Mr. Beck had read on air my report with respect to my Washington and my DC insider, my DHS insider, and there were some other issues with which we had dialogue, and it was always pleasant and favorable. And of course, Alex Jones and I and us, we've had dialogue, and there were some points that Alex and I didn't agree on. Okay, but nonetheless, we went through and went forward. But here is the difference. In this case, in the case of Cliven Bundy and the allegations of racism, and you might think, well, wait a minute, this is old news. No, it's not. The difference is this. There are people out there with motives to bring down, to actually remain part of the mainstream media. For what reason? Because the people who are towing the official narrative, or who are saying, "Well, I felt that that Cliven Bundy had a case until he said what he said with respect to the blacks," which frankly has nothing to do with anything. He was set up. If you understand exactly what happened before, during, and even after the little press conference.
And we don't even have to take into consideration what either Beck or Bundy said. It's what's been going on with the Bureau of Land Management and the land grabs that we've seen from the Agenda 21 plan through the EPA, through the BLM, and who's the mainstream media painted Bundy as a criminal for not paying some grazing fees, which made people pick sides as to who was right and who was wrong before this even got into the big issue it is today.
Exactly. But you see the Alinsky tactic, in reference to Saul Alinsky, what Mr. Beck and others are doing by taking the conversation away from the core discussion, and moving it to something totally irrelevant, and then not dealing with the message, but instead attempting to vilify and nullify the messenger. And this is classic Alinsky. Now, I'm going to tell you what prompted this. What prompted this, and folks, I'm not pulling any punches here. I said originally I was not going to name names, so I'm naming names. What prompted this is a hit piece done yesterday, well, actually 2 days ago, late on April 27th, 2014, by Accuracy in the Media mogul Cliff Kincaid. Cliff Kincaid is a gentleman who wrote the following article: "Some conservative media burned in Cliven Bundy affair." Now, if you haven't seen that article, fine. You don't even have to. I'm not promoting the article. I have to question, or call into question, the journalistic integrity and motives of so-called conservative journalist Cliff Kincaid in this particular matter. Because what Mr. Kincaid is saying is that some very prominent Republicans and conservative media, I'm going to quote him exactly, because I do believe that this is absolutely important for you to see the bigger picture here. And I've thought long and hard about this, and I've prayed about this as well, because I don't like to frag people on our own side. I see I see nothing to be gained by arguing amongst us, okay? But this has transcended arguing amongst us. What is happening here is misdirection and misrepresentation, and I will call it as I see it, for whatever, and accept whatever blowback I might get. So if you're listening or if you're provided with an archive to this broadcast, Mr. Kincaid, Mr. Beck,
I'm going to forward one.
And others, I'm sure you will. And you feel free.
Okay.
But he writes, some prominent Republicans and conservative news media outlets are being accused by the Washington Post of rallying around the cause of Nevada rancher Cliven Bundy. And, of course, he made derogatory comments about, quote, Negroes, end quote, and has been discredited as a racist. But Glenn Beck, the prominent conservative TV and radio host, did not fall into the trap. He concluded early on that the Nevada rancher was unhinged and not worthy of support after noting that some followers of radio host Alex Jones were deeply embedded with the Bundy family, preparing for a confrontation with federal agents. These guys are dangerous. They're looking for revolution. They are looking for a fight, Beck said of the Alex Jones disciples. Those are his words, not mine. Notice the words that are being used here. Alex Jones' disciples. Recognizing a dangerous situation in the media, I'm continuing now, when armed federal agents tried to seize Bundy's cattle, Beck urged a peaceful response to the conflict. Eventually, the federal agents were withdrawn and bloodshed was avoided. Now, folks, okay, from a journalistic point of view, there is nothing journalistic to me, in my professional opinion, in the previous, 4 paragraphs. What is being said here is the way this is being approached is with an agenda to marginalize the followers of Cliven Bundy, the media outlets, and the conservative and or patriotic news outlets, ours included, to say that we're a bunch of racists, to include us as a bunch of racists, and also that we were the ones that were itching for a fight and are itching for a fight. And of course, the only reason that bloodshed was avoided was because the BLM withdrew, because they did not want to exacerbate the situation that was caused by the patriots at the Bundy Ranch, which we know is just totally inaccurate. And of course, I'm not going to read this word for word, but Kincaid goes on to say that Jones is being inaccurately described by some reports about the controversy as a conservative, when in fact he insists he's a libertarian. Note that there's a political distinction here being made, when in fact, we'll just keep that in the back of your mind. Okay, keep that. Conservatives good, libertarians bad. Essentially, is what is being said here or implied. And then he says this: what is an established fact is that Jones has a habit of exploiting legitimate conservative issues for his own benefit. Oh, really? Okay. He's a 9/11 truther, according to Kincaid, who thinks the September 11, 2001 attacks were carried out by a secret cabal and that Muslims were unfairly blamed. Anyone see any problem with that last part of that sentence? Okay. In a decision he was probably come to regret, Sean Hannity of Fox News had followed Jones's lead on the Bundy case. Is that what he did, or is that what Kincaid's perception of it is? Bundy's comments about the Negro being better off under slavery caused Hannity and other responsible conservatives to denounce the rancher. Now, Joe, you and I spoke about this, right?
Somewhat, yeah.
Did in the unedited version of the video, did Bundy say? Did he?
He could use better terminology, but he wasn't saying anything racist.
Right. He was questioning.
He was giving an opinion about the way he saw things and the way things are in his mind, in his opinion.
He was musing about it. But see now, isn't it interesting how the core issue here is the activities of the BLM, the federal government, and the events of the Bundy Ranch, and of course you throw somebody into this reporter's mix to ask a very inciting and racially insightful question, you get an answer like this. you get Cliven Bundy's not answer, but his observations. They're taking us. In fact, he asked a question, or he was musing about
right.
the plight of the blacks and using words like Negro, which and during his time, given his age, were technically used or widely used and technically accurate.
For what it's worth, there were African Americans that were there as part of the security team who backed up Bundy after he made the statements. And as I said before, regardless of what the statements were, I mean, we don't have to like what somebody says, but if the government is going to unfairly use oppression and criminally come after somebody, we have to stand up for those people, regardless of what their personal beliefs are or what they have said in context, or even if it's taken out of context. There's a line where, as you said, the story has been changed from what Clive Bundy said instead of what the government was doing to the Bundy family and ranch.
Right. Sorry about that. And I'll say this, that let me just continue very quickly here. Hannity backed away from Bundy, saying, all right, allow me to make myself abundantly clear. I believe those comments are downright racist. They are repugnant. They are bigoted, and it's beyond disturbing. I find the comments to be deplorable, and I think it's extremely unfortunate that Clive Bundy holds those views.
Now, I don't know about Cliff Kincaid. I don't know too much about him, but I've listened to Beck several times and heard on several occasions him say, we don't have to agree on our beliefs or agree on what we're saying, but if we have our fundamentals that are the same, that we agree with, we can go from there, which seems to be quite the opposite of his actions in regard to the situation.
Yes, and you're correct in your observations. The words, and if you go back through, and I've done this, go back through and you listen to the various broadcasts, whether it be Hannity, whether it be Beck, you see a couple of things. You see this transformation taking place, and people are jumping ship over an issue that's at the very far periphery of the case. Now, it's interesting because if you look on the political forums as well, which we monitor, why? Well, because that's what we do, as well as other forums, including Patriot forums and some pretty obscure forums. We look for a trend in the comments, and we look for what the blowback as to what's happened. Well, let me tell you something. The way that this has turned out, and I'm talking about the way that Clive Bundy has been portrayed by the media, inaccurately so, has caused him to lose a lot of support. And as a result, that has made people in Washington, the leaders, the people behind this land grab, that has given them newfound life. Now, you might think, well, wait a minute, one doesn't have anything to do with the other. You are absolutely correct. One doesn't have anything to do with the other. But the fact is, and the sorry fact is, that the average person on the street is only hearing these alleged racist remarks, and they're not racist at all, but they're capitalizing on that. And now, when I said we have to choose a side, I mean to tell you, we have to choose a side. We cannot any longer afford. Time is running short. Now, I was talking to a nice young lady earlier today, and we were talking about timing. And I do believe we've got time left before the major things happen. But I also see this run up to this horrific events, the collapse of the dollar and war and everything. That's coming. But I do know this, and this I had reported on from my first DHS Insider meeting. And people said that I was hearing voices in my head. Well, my first meeting with my DHS Insider was the fact that this administration, this regime, one of their current goals, or one of their most important goals, is to cause racial division in this country. And you might think, well, boy, that's news. Well, it's not news now, but it was news back then. And, how were they going to do this? This is how. And you know what? They're just like the communists. Remember Khrushchev? remember his and other communist leaders saying America will be captured from within. This is exactly what's taking place right now. We are being marginalized and captured from within. We are losing from within. The people who are supposed to be on our side are jumping ship, and they're the ones that are doing the fragging of people who are trying to get the truth out there. It's not us by disclosing this tactic. This is a deplorable tactic by people who are supposedly respected journalists. Now, I do, and believe me, folks, I do expect to get emails and I'm sure phone calls from people for bringing this topic up. And I wasn't going to do this. It wasn't until minutes before the program that I decided, I'm going to mention this because it needs to be mentioned. Because now we have to pick sides. We have to choose which side we're going to stand on. Are we going to acquiesce so we have another day, another month, another year allowed on the internet to avoid, quote, hate speech, end quote, type of accusations and crimes? Or are we going to stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, this is wrong. This is not right. Don't use this excuse to hide the truth from the public or to divert the argument or to divert the discussion. This is exactly what these people are doing. You've got Hannity jumping ship, diverting the discussion. You've got Glenn Beck never being behind it, now diverting the discussion. And now you've got Cliff Kincaid coming in and taking metaphorically speaking, a machine gun to everyone and pummeling everyone about this. Isn't this rather interesting? To me, I think this is really interesting because we're actually calling out those people who are not really a part of this, who to me don't appear to be interested in the actual argument, but rather interested in vilifying others. But see, what's the end result going to be? You've got to always think bigger. Well, Joe, what did you come up with? You came up with a Senate Bill 2219.
Yeah, let's back up a little bit.
All right.
There was an Internet Governance Summit in Brazil to advance UN's control of the Internet and under the guise of advancing global governance over the Internet by so-called stakeholders, including, of course, governments, autocrats, and international organizations such as the United Nations. The radical Brazilian government brought together key players for the Net Mundial Summit last week, well aware that any obvious plot to advance UN control over the World Wide Web would be a non-starter among Americans and the West. Participants sought to conceal the real agenda in the final agreement behind innocent-sounding language, which they failed to do. The regime of former communist terrorist leader and current Brazilian president Rousseff, which convened the gathering in Sao Paulo, is also the one that arrested Google Brazil chief Coelho in 2012 for refusing to take down a YouTube video attacking a political candidate. And it goes on to state, how the U.S. Said they would give up control of the Internet, and it goes on to say much of what the world, already deeply suspicious of the would-be Internet overlords, the final agreement from the Net Mundial Summit was deliberately scripted to seem non-threatening as possible. It goes on to say that in a preamble, for instance, the document begins by pointing out that this is a non-binding, as if confidence bringing together autocrats, governments, and anti-freedom groups somehow had any sort of authority to bind humanity in any way. The document called for the UN bizarre version of human rights to underpin global Internet governments. Human rights are universal as reflected in the Human Declaration of Human Rights.
All right, it's all about human rights. It's all about these.
Well, we know the UN has its human right charter for not the Internet control, but for control of their new global governance. But here in another article from WorldNet Daily, Big Chill, feds want to scour net and media for hate speech.
Right. What you just heard Joe say earlier was the backdrop for this Senate Bill 2219,
Right.
which is the Go ahead. I don't mean to take it over.
And I guess before we get into that bill, I want to do this. White House wants Chinese-style ID system for Internet users. I'm going to play a quick video here, a 2-minute video advertisement of what the ideas for the NIST, for the Trusted Identities in Cyberspace, has put together.
When you use the Internet, sometimes you want to be anonymous. But sometimes you want to be sure that you and only you can access sensitive information or provide it to others. You might have lots of passwords, too many to remember them all, or maybe you use the same password many times. Either way, ID thieves can guess or steal your passwords and pretend to be you. A group of private and public organizations thinks there's a better way. They're building a voluntary system, an identity ecosystem, where consumers and businesses can more confidently conduct transactions online. If you decide to participate, you would pick one or more private or public secure ID providers and prove your identity. The company or public agency would issue you a trusted credential. It might be a secure application on your cell phone, a smart card, or another device. Your credential proves you are you. Most online providers no longer need your personal information. You could use your trusted ID for sensitive transactions and not use it for others, like surfing the web. Your ID provider would not know how you use your credential. There is no central database tracking your actions. In the new cyber world with trusted IDs, online transactions are safer and more convenient. You control access to your personal information.
So that was basically like the Trusted Traveler program for airplanes. But what the feds are talking about here is what they want to implement is the Senate Bill 2219. It is the National Telecommunications and Information Acquisition or Administration update on the role of telecommunications, including Internet and the consequence of hate crimes. And this bill, in short title, may be called the Hate Crime Reporting Act of 2014.
Okay, stop right there, because here is the deal. Okay, folks, let's cut right to the bone here. The deal is this. The Hate Crime Reporting Act of 2014 would create an updated comprehensive report examining the role of Internet and other telecommunications in encouraging hate crimes based on gender, race, religion, ethnicity, or sexual orientation, and create recommendations to address such crimes.
Also, they would analyze information on the use of telecommunications, including the Internet, broadcast television, radio, cable TV, public access, commercial mobile services, and other electronic media, to advocate. And this is what you just read, this part? Or is this they use the same language? To advocate and encourage violent acts and the commission of crimes of hate, right, as described in the Hate Crime Statistic Act, 28 U.S.C. Note 534, which I have pulled up here.
But see, here's the thing, and this gets me really, really peeved, because what is taking place here? And I see a lot of Christians and a lot of pastors up in arms over this. Oh, wait, no, I don't. The problem with this is, if you, for example, cite a biblical passage that is anti-homosexual, we'll just say anti-homosexual, leave it at that.
Well, that's a hate crime.
It's going to. You look at what's going on in Canada. This is actually what they're doing is they are policing. They're monitoring, they're listening to broadcasts like ours. And what they will do is, and what they are doing is creating lists, or a list of targeted broadcasts. And if we don't conform to their standards, and this goes back to the original story, or the original article that I was talking about, or the original subject I was talking about. If you don't conform to their standards, they will penalize you and shut you down. Now, the reason, for example, and I'll use this as an example, people like maybe Cliff Kincaid and Glenn Beck and others, perhaps the reason, and I'll ask this as a question, could it be that the reason that they're towing this line so closely, that they, of course, want to denounce Bundy, because they certainly can see the writing on the wall with S-2219 and where this is all going, and they don't want to be labeled?
And to note, the bill does not define which actions by broadcasters would be considered to have encouraged violence, seemingly leaving that open to interpretation. WorldNet Daily states.
Well, here's the thing. If you or I get on the air and say homosexuality, as an example, is a very, very, it's against God's laws, somebody hears it and goes out and happens to murder, torture, or whatever, a homosexual, and they get hauled into court, and they find perhaps on their computer our program. Well, and somebody listens to our program or knows about our program, we could be drawn into the litigation or the prosecution in any civil litigation. Trust me on this, folks. This is bigger. The origins of what I spoke about earlier are connected to S-2219, the intent, at the very least, not necessarily connected directly, but at least indirectly. Folks, we are under attack, and they are attempting to silence the truth tellers in the alternative media. One of the biggest threats to this regime are the truth tellers.
And you think the churches are going to stand up and talk about what they're going to stand up for, against people who say calling homosexuality is a sin, that being a hate crime? Listen to this. The clergy in North Carolina has sued same-sex marriage on the basis that the same-sex marriage ban violates religious freedom. This is the clergy in North Carolina is suing, saying that gay marriage violates the religious freedom, gay marriage ban.
When it comes down to it, day one, hour one, in my capacity as an investigator, student investigator, the money. Folks, it's all about the 501c3. It's all about the ability, the foresight to stay on the air.
I can't say it's all about 501c3 yet. We know pastors that are 501c3 that are not.
Well,
but that is a huge thorn in the side of pastors that are leaning towards, making a decision to lead their congregation in one way or the other. It hinders the truth. It hinders some pastors from actually being truthful and 100% honest with their congregation.
Right. Now, if you overlay the religious, or not religious, but spiritual aspect of this, the biblical aspect of what you're talking about, if you look at what's taking place in the lay area, the non or the secular area of journalism, for example, what we're seeing here is this push toward you either go along with us and you either be silent about one issue or this particular issue, or you speak out against it by marginalizing the messengers. Case in point, way back when in 2008 with the Obama identity, in continuing to today, Obama's eligibility to be president constitutionally speaking. Okay, how many journalists were told not to talk about it? How many journalists would come out and say, "Oh, that's just a bunch of poppycock. It's baloney." So-called respected journalists. No respected, dignified journalist would dare talk about this fringe topic about Obama's eligibility. This is being carried through today. This is being. Because, and see, it's that the camel's nose under the tent aspect. You let them get away with controlling the topics, including, back in 2008, Obama's eligibility. It grows and it grows and it grows to now where Now they're fine-tuning it, and they're like heat-seeking missiles on certain topics. You begin to talk about Obama's criminal activities in with respect to Benghazi, or with respect to the Bundy situation. This is what we're seeing. It's grown now to this.
And I want to go back to the article about these clergy in North Carolina. This says a coalition of clergy members is challenging North Carolina's ban on same-sex marriages, filing the first lawsuit to claim such laws violate their religion of freedom guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution. Led by the United Church of Christ, a rabbi and ministers from Lutheran and Unitarian Universalist churches in the Charlotte area say they should not be penalized for following their faith. The lawsuit filed in the Western District of North Carolina is the first to attack same-sex marriage bans on the grounds of religious freedom under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. I mean, what do the churches expect? If you don't expect some sort of punishment or judgment from God for being the one spearheading a ban to remove a ban on same-sex marriage, the churches are the ones behind this, getting this ball rolling. This is as bad, or this is worse than Supreme Court judges overturning voters' rulings or votes from states like California, where they had the Prop 8 vote that California voters upheld. I think it was 52-48 to ban same-sex marriages. Then you had the Supreme Court of Appeals come in and overturn their vote, calling it unconstitutional. You now have a coalition of church clergy, from rabbis to ministers of different denominations to the United Church of Christ, spearheading and advocating for the right of homosexuals to marry based on First Amendment religious freedom. Violating the Bible, violating the very teachings they are upholding or sworn to teach or took an oath to teach.
No, you're 100% correct, Joe. I just want to take a moment here. I want to thank John. I want to thank Wiley. I want to thank Anna. I want to thank Kevin, just to name a few. Kevin, I'm not sure where I know John's from California. I'm not sure where the others are from. I apologize. I should know that, but I want to thank you for sending in emails, because, folks, you know that what we're talking about here is going to generate a lot of blowback. Trust me when I tell you that.
That's fine, and I think Tim in the chat room said it best, that they claim the First Amendment allows them to have homosexual marriage. Well, it also allows people to disagree and speak out against what they don't believe in.
But folks, there is a price that will be paid by people in the short term here, and I can promise you this. By speaking the truth, by not going along, it's kind of like being in Congress. If you watched Boehner and his mocking of the conservatives, of the Republicans, did you happen to see that? Where, I don't want to touch this issue. He mocked these conservatives about not wanting to tackle the immigration reform. Now this is very similar. You've got this unwritten law, or this it's not even unwritten law, but it's this pressure. It's this unspoken pressure. You don't go after your own conservative people, so to speak, or the people that are supposedly on the same side. Well, no, you do, especially when the truth is being mangled, when the truth is not being told, when in fact people are adhering to incorrect positions because and only so that they can continue to stay on the air and be favored and not be audited, not be threatened by this regime, by not taking them on. Well, frankly, something, when you've got nothing to lose, and I say this from a position of experience, when you've got nothing to lose, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. What can they possibly take away from me? You want my 14-year-old van? You want my...
I know a couple of things they could take away that certainly would seem like nothing to most people, but would be a huge inconvenience to you. They could take away your ability to sit in the studio and do your work. They could take away your computer screen. They could put you in a cell with no pen or paper and electrodes to your mind so you can't think.
But isn't that kind of sad? When we've got to think in those terms.
I'm just messing.
But yeah, they see, But here's the thing: people unwilling to take on the eligibility issue are the same people who are mocking Alex Jones, who are elevating others, who are talking. Well, let's immigration reform is a humanitarian issue, and it's a loving issue. Jeb Bush, for crying out loud, okay? Karl Rove spoke about him as being the most intellectual of the Bushes. God help us all. God help us all.
It's like the Republicans saying they're waving the white flag on trying to go after Obamacare. How are you going to wave a white flag for something that you never stood up to fight for or stop when you had the chance anyway? That's like me, that's like us being a front line of an army and letting them come in and laying our weapons down, and then after they collected all the weapons and rounded us up saying, okay, we give up now. I mean, you never stood and fought for it in the first place. You never stood to stop it in the first place. How are you going to give up something you never stood for to stop?
Exactly. Folks, I just want to say this. Right now, the truth is what is important to get out to people, and we do this. We try to provide the truth in any and all areas, and if we don't know something, we try to research the hell out of it, and we try to bring to you the best information possible. But right now, we see we're getting very close to a point where it's either you conform to our talking points or we're going to shut you down. Now, we've not been threatened like that, but we can see the writing on the wall. And we can see with the big talkers, for instance, like Hannity and Glenn Beck, who have taken on Alex Jones, and people, there are people who unfairly criticize Alex Jones for numerous reasons. But in the end, if you're not criticizing, or if you are criticizing the man instead of the message, and this goes for anybody, I don't care if it's John Doe, Alex Jones, or even, and here's the other thing too, that the same applies to the people who are carrying the line for Obama. You don't criticize Rachel Maddow, you don't criticize Chris Matthews in terms of their looks, personality, or whatever, or their methods of saying something. You criticize the message, not the messenger. You've got a problem with the message, not the messenger. But in this case, what I see taking place is, for example, as I mentioned, Cliff Kincaid going after the messenger, Glenn Beck going after the messengers. And to me, that's unfair. That's not right. That is absolutely not right. Sean Hannity going after the messengers and diverting. Equally important is by diverting the topics from what's important to what's not so important. So we have to stay the course. We have to keep putting the truth out there until we no longer can, and that's our promise to you. We will do that until we no longer can. And you can attack me all day long. You can attack my looks, my way of speaking. You can attack. You can even
attack what we say, but what we stand for is written in Scripture, and by attacking arguments against right and wrong from what God said, then you're attacking more than just the messenger.
Exactly, and we don't have all the answers scripturally. Believe me, we don't. Pastor Langford, of course, we turn to him for our spiritual guidance. He's got boy, I'll tell you, if he doesn't have all of them, he certainly has most of them. I say that. From a position of a man, of course, not to falsely flatter or deify him, but to say that he knows what he's talking about, I guess. But the fact of the matter is, we have to make a stand. Folks, you have to make a stand. You have to decide what position you're going to take. If you're going to accept the milky oatmeal, I just don't really think it's good to be involved. Or if you're going to stand up and say, you know what, you're wrong on this. The conversation is not about race. Racist remarks, because they weren't. If you're not willing to call out these people, then in fact you're not part of the fight. And I think our audience, however, the 99.99% of our audience is right on the money and part of the fight. I really do. I talking with a couple of people here over the last couple of days, Joe, we were talking about the audience level and seeing such, having gone over some emails together and seeing the articulate responses to emails that we've gotten, or the articulate information that we've gotten from emailers, from listeners. It's so refreshing to see the level of intelligence in the way of, it really is, compared to, for example, some of the inane sewage kind of statements you see on political and other forums. It's just a night and day difference. And I say that only to say this. I believe that you folks know exactly where we're coming from. So tomorrow, by the way, should be an interesting day, telephone-wise and email-wise. I have a feeling. Trust me when I tell you.
Oh, I didn't mention I have to take my car into the garage at 8 in the morning, and they said it won't be done until about 7 o'clock.
Well, so
I'll be busy watching the mechanics work.
Yeah, that's a yeah. I got to do something tomorrow. I don't know for the next 24 hours. No, but you know what? We laugh about it because but we're ready to take the heat, and I can guarantee you there's going to be heat generated from this. But I say this because it's getting late in the game. Although when I talked to a young lady today, look, I think we have some time. We in terms of making preparations, adequately preparing for what's coming. But I think what we need to do is start being really serious, taking a good hard look at where we're at, look at how quickly they're coming after us on the internet, wondering how long we can actually broadcast on the internet, and making sure that we have the ability to continue spreading the word should they take the internet as a tool away from us. And I think that's something that we have to, and we have been working on, by the way, but it's something that we all have to think about, because I do see a time, Joe, where they're going to say, you know what, the political distance will not be tolerated, because it is, in fact, it's really fomenting this civil disobedience. Can you imagine back in '68 when they had all the riots, or in the '60s with the Watts riots, and going back in the '60s? Can you imagine back then having the internet, or even during the Rodney King riots, if you're not as old as I am, and looking at that in 1990, 91 in Los Angeles? Can you imagine those riots, for example, under this administration with the internet? Never let a crisis go to waste. Rahm Emanuel. And the potential for the legislation of what you can and can't say on the internet. That's what we're talking about. That's the ultimate. It's stifling not just free speech, but stifling the truth. This is the price that we are looking at. This is the cost. This is the crux of the issue. Folks, I hope you really understood where I was going with this. We didn't get a chance to talk about Benghazi. There's a lot of lies within Benghazi.
We can get into that in the third hour.
We can.
We have Stan Dale coming up in a few minutes for our Tuesdays with Stan. And later this week, we have a special on Friday evening with our intelligence insider. He'll be joining us Friday. Sunday, we have Pastor Langford and Steve Quill coming on for a special Sunday broadcast. And I want to say that I talked to Nathan Leal for a while today, an hour, 2 hours, I'm not sure. But he'll be on Thursday, a week from this Thursday, next Thursday, May 8th. And it won't be about the Super Bowl. We talked about a lot of things and some things pertaining to what my dad and I were talking about this evening. And it's going to be a great show. So Thursday, May 8th, Nathan Leal will be on with us. And, oh, goodness. There he is. My dad...
I think you're muted. Or did I just unplug myself here?
No.
Or what?
My dad jumped up off his seat like he saw a wild boar.
Yeah, we have a
looking my way.
A nuisance spider in the studio.
If that thing's a spider, then our 150-pound German Shepherd is a poodle.
Well,
did you see where he went?
Up your leg.
I think I would notice him crawling on my shoe.
No, actually, we'll keep an eye out for him. Yeah,
did you see if he turned around because he was coming right at me and he looked angry? Yeah,
did you hear him walking? He was walking.
I could hear him.
Okay, no, I'm just folks, it's interesting because we did do some minor remodeling in the studio to make this more sound efficient and also and also more video efficient video wise. And I've got to say this, with all the rain we have, it's interesting how the rain has brought the spiders out. And
when we were doing the remodeling, my dad was surprised. He was wondering where all the spiders were, and I said, just wait till everything's finished. Then they'll come out. And sure enough.
Yeah, indeed. Well, one spider doesn't make... but yeah, folks, spiders creep me out. I could... that
was a big, black, hairy looking thing.
It wasn't hairy. It wasn't big. It was big, but it was...
I saw its shadow. I saw it coming.
Yeah. Well, actually, it just moved the book and... it's on your desk. I'm kidding around. But folks, yeah, now that we've wasted 2 minutes of your time talking about our phobias or my phobia, didn't mean to do that. But the thing is this, the target here, and the thing being is that the target that we're talking about is the truth. And we really have to bear in mind the agendas of the people who are talking, who are we have to be very vigilant of how we are being this neuro-linguistic programming being used against us. I really think that that's important. We have to be aware of that. And this even goes back into the mind control by the CIA, and of course Cliff Kincaid would probably, although that's the other thing too, since I'm on that, the other thing too that Cliff Kincaid was saying did not exist was the New World Order. That's just a conspiracy theory, or the global governance. How that relates to the Bundy or the racist remarks of the Bundys, by Mr. Bundy, the alleged racist remarks by Mr. Bundy, I'll never know. Interesting how, though, this is spread out, and if you watch, it's pure Saul Alinsky all the way. But folks, I want to thank you.
Take it from their own words. Their global governance summits, their New World Order speeches, and by our very special guest, which we are joined by every Tuesday, Stan Deo. His website is standeo.com. Go there and check out his books, the Dare to Prepare, the Preparedness Manual to go by, is one of my favorite books, The Cosmic Conspiracy, and many more. Stan, it's great to have you back on this Tuesday.
Good to have survived another week and be here with you guys. Hello, Doug. Hello, Joe.
Stan, it's great to hear you. Okay, Stan, now I got to, right out of the chute, we got to ask you a question here. All right. You are the physicist. You know, a whole bunch of stuff, more than we know. What's a good way to keep spiders away from your house, or studio, or garage, or living area? Spiders, yeah.
Half spider, half beast.
Well, gee, that's a good question. I wish I knew the answer. I mean, we've certainly got our share of the little devils that crawl around the walls and stuff.
Well, over where you're at, you've got you've got the poisonous kind, the brown recluse, and I guess they're all over, aren't they? But black widows.
Yeah, we had down in Australia when we lived down there, we had some really nasty ones around the property. Really black, terrible-looking things. Fun web spiders and what they call the redback, their version of the red widow, the black widow. And then they had a little tiny thing. They had a hard shell, but it had 8 legs. It had a little white tip on its backside. It was, I forget the name of it, but if it bit you, it gave you the rotting flesh, I guess, well, it's not a virus, but a bacteria. Anyway, we had one of those get loose in our bedroom once, and I tore the bedroom apart trying to find the little devil. Couldn't find him until we moved, and he'd been killed and was back behind the bed there.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, we also had 2 scorpions in the bedroom when we had the wooden floors. And, on the polished floors, they go scurrying across and slip slide around. And, of course, you get up in the middle of the night barefoot. That's not the best thing to do. But, yeah, that was Australia. Here, we see these little probably 1/4 inch to 3/8 inch diameter spiders. They wander out from the basement and all around the property out there from time to time. But as far as keeping them away from the joint, I don't know what I'd tell you.
Just curious. You had to ask the real Indiana Jones who faces bigger threats than that. But
I remember in that cave when I was over in the Qumran near the Dead Sea in the Wadi Haqiqah, the cave of the column. In the dark there, I was standing on the ledge, and I do remember that I thought I had a spider drop on my shoulder, boom, like big as my hand. And, I had gloves on, climbing gloves, so I reached up in the dark and swept it off, and it fell down, down probably 15 feet. And I heard it hit the dirt. And when I got down to that level, I lit the light again, and I could see that it was a bat and not a spider. So, I feared for the worst, but it was only a bat.
I got to tell you, Stan, I had a bat in the house I used to own with my, this is, oh my gosh, 20 years ago. We had gone boating one evening and brought life jackets and what have you in to the house and put them by the door, the Slavs that we were at the time. It didn't disturb them. And the next day, of all people, my mother-in-law came in to and picked up the life jackets, and a bat flew out. Okay, now I've never heard. I assume it was there. It came in from the dock, I believe, but that really freaked me out. Having a bat there in the house flying around. We finally got it out of the house that we were in, but strange. So you had a bat land on your shoulders. That couldn't have been. That had to be a little bit of.
Well, in the dark, you don't know what it was, and as I say, I did feel that it was warm, and I thought I hoped that warmth was an animal with warm blood rather than a spider. But there in the heat of the desert, you don't know what it was, So yeah, wow. It was interesting.
So you survived a lot of brushes with these things with wildlife. I'm not a fan of wildlife, to be honest with you. So,
well, yeah, in the cave north of there, second cave north of there, next to the Dead Sea, I went in that one afternoon, and my mate went in with me, and he and I were, treading softly because it was damp and moist and warm inside there. That means there's usually something alive in there. And we stepped on a couple of bones of some big animal, probably a deer or something like that had been gnawed real clean. And in the shadows, it wasn't just a straight cave. There was like rocks on the side and boulders and whatever inside. And we could feel, it's funny, but you can feel when you're being watched. And there are big cats in the area. So we very carefully went back to back and backed out of that joint. We figured it didn't want to be his next meal. So it got exciting.
Wow. Stan, I'll tell you, for the rush that would have, I give you a lot of credit for
being crazy.
Yeah, but also for using discernment to get out of there when you felt that tingly sense of danger. That's wow, interesting. You should write a book.
Hey, that sounds like an idea. There were some fun times over there, but there's no time to do that nowadays.
I guess not. Well, Stan, tell us, as we sit here, and I've been hearing from a lot of people talking about weather, a lot of questions for you today about what in the world is going on with our weather. Our power out here was out at my house and at the studio, both, for about almost 6 hours, 5 hours.
We had a 60-mile-an-hour gust. Winds today. We had tree branches down all over the place. There was last night in my neighborhood was garbage night, and this morning just about every neighbor was walking 4 or 5 houses down to find their garbage can. It was pretty nasty. And I saw you sent me in Skype the different pictures to differentiate between microbursts and tornadoes. And let's talk about this storm that is in the the Midwest that keeps continuing to generate.
Well, there's a line of demarcation in the the wind patterns for the United States. I don't have it on my show images page, but there's a thing I gave you not long ago called the Earth Wind Map that you can get from earth.nullschool.net. And it shows the United States at the moment has kind of this line, almost a straight line running from the kind of Great Lakes down toward the tip of Texas. And it's aligned, well, actually, the southeast tip, right where maybe the Mississippi is, in that area, the mouth of it down the Gulf of Mexico. And it shows a stable zone between two active wind regions on the planet. Now, they're not fast winds or anything, but it's the aftermath of what's gone through the West and what's been through Georgia and Tennessee and that area, and Arkansas and Kentucky. Now, a lot of the people in those areas that are weather, meteorologists, are trying to figure out, in some of the cases, whether it was a tornado or a microburst that hit some of these areas. We had a microburst hit out in the plains just east of us here in Pueblo. And a microburst can be a lot worse than a tornado. It starts out at about 170 miles an hour and greater, and it'll drop down out of the sky, straight down all of a sudden. You won't see a little, like a spinning tip coming out of the cloud with a tornado. This will drop straight down and splat onto the earth and spread out in kind of a fan shape, which is one of those images I sent you. You can share that in the chat room. But anyway, that kind of wind can break off, trees, just bang, suddenly. They don't even have time to have elastic rebound. It just drops down and hits them like a scythe, and it'll cut miles in front of it as the wind, which drops down out of the cloud, heavier air, it will just cut through there. And they think that that's what's hit a number of these places and why it was so damaging, because people had no time to say, oh, look, there's a tornado coming, we'll get out of the way. It just dropped down. And I think we're going to see more microbursts as the climate changes progress. I've been predicting this probably for 7 or 8 years at least, that we would see extremes in the weather as we got closer to the apex of the climate change, and we are getting climate change for a variety of reasons. Now, if the Earth does not shift on its axis like the spin of it, if we keep up like we are now, then we can fairly well predict where areas will get, more hurricanes or tornadoes or things like that. But if the Earth actually does start to shift on its axis, it may make new weather patterns we've never seen before across the entire planet and obviously across the United States. Right now, without the shift in the axis, off the coast of Washington, Oregon, I see a wall of differential. It's kind of like a lazy flattened S. And that's moving into the west coast of the United States. We may be in for another round of what you've just seen in the last week across from the Midwest over to where you guys are. We'll wait and see. But anyway, these events are part of the extremes that I expected from the increased heating from the sun. Now, just 5 days ago, we had an EIT event, which is an ultraviolet type wave explosion on the surface of the sun, and instead of it sending a flare straight at the Earth, it spread out across the surface of the sun like a big ripple. And these are quite rare and interesting events because they just make the whole surface of the sun look like it's jelly when they explode like that. And they release a lot of ultraviolet, high-frequency radiation. Since the sun in 1992 started putting out 2 new bands of ultraviolet, which no one knew why, the attention is focused on the ultraviolet events that we see, extreme ultraviolet events on the sun. It did interrupt high-frequency radio transmissions from Hawaii over toward China and, into Asia for a few hours. Fortunately, we didn't get a direct hit from the CME that followed it a day or so later. But traveling at 1 million miles an hour, it traversed the sideways wave of it, traversed the sun, the entire disk, in a short time, in about an hour, I think. So anyway, that's what's happening with these really strong wind events that are shearing off trees. we're going to see more of that, I think. And if you could almost call that like a vertical derecho, like a straight line event. It just comes straight down. It's a very narrow derecho, but derechos spread over hundreds of miles into kind of a front that has these high winds along it. So you've got derechos, microbursts, you've got tornadoes, and hurricanes that do move inland, becoming landicanes, if you wish. These things this season may be very violent. We've come through a couple of years of drought in the West and Midwest, and I'm seeing signs of maybe that's going to break where we are, but it's not certain yet. The weather is just going to be kind of unpredictable, or not accurately predictable. I feel for the weather guys because they're over here. They're not getting it right too often, and it's just because they're dealing with factors that are new and unknown in their computer models. And, of course, we can factor in chemtrails and things like that, which I still think the majority of those are being done to shield us from the increased heating from the sun. I could be wrong, but anyway, when you put all those factors together, man-made issues and solar variables, then you can see that we've got some problems here. Okay.
All right. So, I do have a question off topic from the storms and tornadoes, and I'm not sure if you saw this. I'll post a link in Skype just in case. May meteor storm alert, all eyes on the sky. And it says between Saturday, May 23rd and 24th of May, skywatchers across the U.S. and southern Canada may witness the birth of a brand new meteor shower. If predictions hold true, the Earth will pass through multiple trails of dust and pebble bits left behind by Comet 209P Linear, firing up a celestial display on par with the strongest showers of the year or better. And I'm not sure if you saw this or not. I just saw this today.
I did see that there's been an increase in small meteorites, sand grains and whatever the Canadian Observatory picked up, the Skywatch there. Yeah, look, these things are normally associated with the comets, the comet tails, asteroids, large meteors that also, they're not like a comet because you can't see them throwing a tail, but they'll have junk around them. So it's good to pay attention to these, especially since some of them we never actually know about until they're almost on top of us. I go out last, I think night before last, I went out with the dogs about 10:30 our time here, Mountain Time, and had to look up into the western sky where we can normally see various meteor showers, and I did see a few of them streaking down, but they reminded me really from their thinness of being grain-sized, sand grain-sized things. They weren't really big things. You don't want to see those anyway, but I'm just saying that we did see a few, and the doggies didn't seem to be too interested in it, but I was. Anyway, we're going to see more of these and more unexpected things over the period of time here between now and probably end of 2015, maybe into 2016, as we go through the double peak of this 24th sunspot cycle on the sun. There are a lot of things in the news, other than the violent weather. Certainly, we've had enough of that, and people have been hurt by that. Like 29 have died. I was just talking to another radio host, Morris Hoffman, today on the phone. He's about 35 miles where those things hit in, I think it's Arkansas. And, he said it hit us last year. We had tornadoes hit the house, and it wiped our house out. And we haven't finished putting the new floor back into this house, and here it comes again. He said, I'm hoping we can duck what's coming. And when you talk to someone like that, it's more personal. You kind of really get involved in what's happening instead of looking at statistics in some news report. So we're keeping him in our prayers, and his family and his house and those around him.
What's his name so we can also...
Morris Hoffman, Hoffman.
All right. We'll keep Mars and all the people there in our prayers. I just felt it odd too, Stan. Not that this means anything necessarily, but the town, the community that was hardest hit is Mayflower. That's the name of the town, and it just made me think. I mean, it could have been anything, any name. Pick a name or pick a community, but interestingly enough, it happened to be Mayflower. It just makes you think a little bit more, especially when you have people writing books like Eye to Eye, which goes into what we've done to Israel and the ramifications here domestically that we feel. It's just something I thought of.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that it's not too bad a judgment on us. But I think what we've been doing to Israel as a country has certainly put a bullseye on us from the good Lord. We've passed the time, the 29th, for the peace treaty to be resolved, and both sides shaking fists at each other over there. I know that the Israelis are saying that if they do not have control of the Temple Mount in the negotiations for the peace treaty, that they won't play, they won't come to the table. And of course, the Palestinians say, well, if you don't accept Hamas, a terrorist organization, at the table, then we're not coming. And so it's a stalemate at the moment. And so we've passed through what we thought might be a very interesting event over there. The Bible does say that the Gog, Magog, the Russian-German consortium, whatever, coming down into, in Turkey, coming into Israel to invade it, will occur with unwalled villages, at peace, in other words. And that is definitely not Israel at the moment. And even if a peace treaty were agreed and signed today, it would be several months before they could tear down the walls that have been built up between the two camps by Israel, and for people to feel relatively safe and peace and security and all that kind of stuff. And these words are bandied around in most of the peace treaty drafts that have been drawn by either the Oslo Accords or by the Kerry document. And they say peace and security. I mean, even Nimrod Novik, who I keep an eye on over there, is a chairman of the board, or still a member of the board. He was chairman for a while, but of an organization that's dedicated to establishing peace and security in the region of Israel. And these are just biblical, the terms peace and security. I think some English translations say peace and safety, but it's the same thing, peace and security. So keep watching those things in the news when they talk peace and security as sudden destructions upon them. And I don't think that the unwalled villages time would be just immediately after being invaded by Russia and its allies in that Gog-Magog invasion. There are a number of things that could be telling us more about it, but we're still trying to figure it out.
Well, it's my understanding, Stan, that Israel, as you said, unwalled villages. It's my understanding that Gog-Magog, what precedes that is Israel as a nation experiences this condition of regional superiority, which essentially allows it to dwell securely in an otherwise very, very insecure, very unstable neighborhood. And that, of course, is not what we see now. And Bill Salus, for example, the author of Israelistan, and also Psalm 83, talks about the Psalm 83 war that would perhaps be the missing puzzle piece, whereby the Middle East would break out in this sort of regional conflict. And of course, that in and of itself would allow Israel to regain a large section of land or sections of land, and of course be fit the criterion for the Gog-Magog war. Any thoughts on that?
I'd have to look at that in detail. These things aren't, in my opinion, you can't just look at a couple of verses and say, I understand. I mean, it's like trying to sort out the rapture, pre-trib, mid, or post. There are considerable arguments in all positions. And the Gog-Magog thing, all these are important issues about the time of the end. And we're trying to figure out from current events if that's where we are. Like rebuilding the temple, the third temple that they're talking about. there's the temple foundation over there is already cut using a diamond saw, not with a normal wood metal saw. They've used a diamond saw to keep it kosher, and they've cut two several ton blocks to be the cornerstones of the new temple. And when you question them about it, they say, "Well, look, we're going to build it up there where it's supposed to be, on top of the Temple Mount." Well, what about the mosques up there? Well, there's always an earthquake, and if an earthquake happens and it breaks down, we'll just clear the debris and we'll put up the temple, that God told us to. And I've heard this more than once over the last, 30 years. Even in Australia, the rabbi I studied was down there, and I asked him the same thing, and he said, "Oh, well, there's always an earthquake." I guess nowadays, even an earthquake would be questioned as part of some earthquake weapon generated by the Israelis or the Americans or something. This is going to happen, but whether it's going to happen this week or not is another thing. I expect they'll need 2 or 3 years to build a temple that big. In fact, if you go over to the website, I sent you the link to our show images page. On the top row, you can see in the middle of it, there's a 95-pound, it's like gold, 95 pounds of gold in a menorah that's already been built by the Jerusalem Temple Foundation over there for the third temple. And they've erected it in glass and made it, secured right near the plaza that leads up to the Wailing Wall, the Western Wall, which is, of course, the western wall of the foundation where the Temple of Solomon, or the third temple, would be built. Now, if they're spending that much money, it's already valued at $2 million worth of gold in that menorah, and being made according to the instructions that were passed down from the time of Moses on how to do it. If they've done that, they're stating their intentions very, very clearly that they want to rebuild the third temple up on the top of the Wailing Wall, on the actual mesa or table where the original first and second temples were built. Now, left of that image on the top row there, I have a model of the second temple that's a really high-resolution model. It'll take a little bit to load, but it gives you a really detailed look at what the temple of Herod, the second temple, looked like in those days. And you can see that there would be a fair amount of work in cutting those stones and putting them together without mortar. They have to be laid one on another and fit like they do in the foundation that you can see if you go underneath the Temple Mount, some of the tunnels, beneath the Arabic or Muslim additions to the foundation on the top. In fact, I was down there in '89. I did go down or in behind the Wailing Wall. There's what they call the Kohanim, or the priest tunnel, the Kohanim Kotel they call it. And I went down. It's a narrow tunnel and it opens up into a bigger room there. I think it's called Wilson's Gate now or something like that. But it's all behind the Wailing Wall and under the foundation, or under the plateau where the dome of the mosque and the rock and all that kind of stuff are sitting up there. So anyway, I did take a picture and I put a copy of it in the Vindicator Scrolls of a tunnel to the left going off of that, going deep underneath the Temple Mount. And I think they may have opened it up now, but they won't let archaeological teams in there, just, tourists and things like that to see. There's a couple more sealed gates and a huge 20-ton stone. And the prevailing wisdom in the area is that the Ark of the Covenant and the real gold and copper instruments for the temple are back behind that rock in a small chamber, and that they were dropped into that with sand-loaded, like hydraulic pillars, which dropped the whole area down inside there. Once these plugs were knocked out and the sand poured in, it was like an Egyptian pyramid trap, and that these were activated so that invaders who came into Jerusalem could not steal the Holy of Holies and various other things. And, I think from what I've read, too, that the Ark must be really close within Israel's borders. And I think the logical thing would have been to have, like in the Maccabean report, to have a fake Ark of the Covenant taken out in the time of the Babylon invasion and up to the Mount Nebo and buried there out of sight of the Babylonian soldiers, and come back and report, well, the Israelis just said, we've buried it in a safe place, your guys can't find it. But it was a ruse, I think, and the real Ark stayed beneath the temple, behind that 20-ton block in that little room. And soundings, ultrasound and rock penetration, various other things have proved that there is a cavity in that area, which could be interesting. But these things take time, and that's kind of what I'm trying to factor into current events now. How long is it going to take, and are we going to see that this year, next year, the beginning of it? Are we going to have a nuclear war? Are we going to have several threats of nuclear war, small skirmishes with the Russians or something like that, and that will trigger, massive events across the planet requiring someone to step in, Satan and the Great Deception? Don't know. I did run across an article today in the Italian Gazette that says that the Russians are complaining that if the United States puts sanctions on Russia because of their dealings in Ukraine, that it will hurt or endanger the American astronauts on board the space station, International Space Station, because you got a couple of American astronauts, some Russian ones up there and whatever. And immediately what came to mind was a scene out of the movie 2010, A Space Odyssey, not one, but the 2010 one, and you can click on that picture and see what I'm talking about, where you've got a Russian commander of the Russian contingent on a spacecraft on the way to Jupiter, and on the right, an American in charge of the American contingent on board the same spacecraft. They shared the space to go research this particular thing. And in the TVs in the background, on the left, you can see the Russian Prime Minister, and in the front, you can see the American president, and they're both reading to their respective citizens on board this, saying, "We're now in a state of war, and we want you to move over, to your side of the spaceship, and the others to move over to your side." And it's a really, we thought at the time, well, gee, that's a pretty strange script, but okay. And it's happening now. We're up on the space station. I guess our guys are going to be saying to the Russians, you stay on your side and don't cross this line, and we'll give you bathroom privileges if you'll give us kitchen privileges or something like that. But it's crazy. I mean, we're seeing it come to pass. It's almost like it was prophetic.
I don't mean, I don't want to sound trite by asking this question, but I'll take the chance. Do you really see that as a possibility of happening? I mean, discord in space like that?
Look, it really depends on the individuals. When you're out in space, it's pretty much like, okay, I come from that country, you come from the other country, but if we don't help each other, we could both die. So it's a mutually assured destruction if they don't get along, in spite of what their leaders say. There may be some, encoded traffic goes back and forth or whatever, but look, it's like being on a desert island up there. You got to survive, and you need everybody, all hands on deck. So I'm not too worried about that, but it was just the insanity of such a situation actually being possible now.
Yeah, you're right. But nonetheless, I mean, to think that we have been placed in this position, and I use that phrase deliberately because I do believe this whole thing has been orchestrated, especially at the intelligence level. But it's really crazy. I've got a question here from a listener in New Mexico who wants to know if you've heard anything about the heifer, about the heifer that is supposed to have. I'm not too clear on the story, but there's a reference to the heifer. Can you explain that?
For the third temple to be built and then operational, they need to get as many of the original instruments as possible from the last temple, and also they need to get the ashes of the red heifer. It's called the para adumah in Hebrew. Now, what happened back in the time of Moses for the sacrifice? God told him how to find a perfect red heifer where there were no white or gray hairs, no other kind of hairs on that heifer, a perfect red heifer, which he did find. And he was to kill it in a ritual manner, a kosher manner, and then burn it to ashes and mix some of the dung from that cow with the ash and water and do various things to make water from the ashes that would allow people who've been near a corpse or come into contact with a corpse to be clean, ritually clean and purified. And that was primarily for the Levites, who were the priests, so that they could go before the Almighty in the temple tabernacle of the wilderness. They had to be ritually clean. Now, that means that the the priests that are now in training in Israel, and they're paying somewhere around $400 to $500 American on the current exchange rate to train as priests to serve in the new temple that they're going to build. Now, these are people making career plans for a temple that's not officially going to be built, or no one is given permission to build, but they're getting trained to do it. And for them to enter into service, they have to be cleaned with the water purification made from the ashes of the red heifer. Now, the two schools of thought in the world here, particularly among the Orthodox or observant Jewish community and the kind of liberal Jewish community. The Orthodox say that we need the original ashes of the red heifer if we can find them, and they're buried somewhere. We don't know where they are. And the purists within them say, look, yeah, but if you do recover them, somebody finds them, how do we know that they're like clean now because of the way they were stored, or who has touched them since they were stored away? A lot of silly arguments like that. But if they can't get the ashes of the red heifer in a manner that says they are clean and can be used, then they'll have to make a new set. Normally, in the old days, they would take part of the ashes of the original red heifer and mix it with the ashes of the new one they would find and build up this water purification. There's actually a crowd here in the United States trying to breed the red heifer, the flawless red heifer. Again, the purists say, well, okay, that's grown in the United States. We can't use it. It's got to be grown here in a certain part of Israel, which I think may be under Palestinian control at the moment. But anyway, you see all these factors that are tugging at bringing in the ritual worship that they used to do in the first and second temple. But I am pretty sure that they're all going to come together in some, unforeseen way and be allowed. The fact that they're training the priests, the fact that they're trying to get, a red heifer, and the fact that they've been looking for the aromatic spice that they burn to burn in the new temple, tell us that they are getting serious about this. A friend of mine, Vendel Jones, did a lot of research, led several expeditions, quite a few over there into the Qumran area looking for the ashes and never found them. But he thinks, he thought before he died, that they had found 900 pounds of this material inside the Wadi Haqiqah cave down on the second level. And there's a good reason for him thinking that. I mean, they did test it. Allegedly, the Department of Antiquities tested it and said, yes, well, that's got all the spices and things that we would need, and it must be the fragrances, the powder of the fragrances that we burn in the temple. Of course, later on, there was a group that said, no, we can't see any proof of that. I don't know how they could say that. But it is known that several of the flowers that grew down by the Dead Sea that were used for the aromatic spices in it are no longer grown on the planet. And so they don't have the original spice dust. I don't know how they're going to get around that problem, but I'm sure there's a way. I mean, normally it had cedar and hyssop and I think probably frankincense and myrrh and a few others, but it had a particular formula that the priest used to make it. Anyway, that's a long answer about the red heifer. The Muslims in the Quran, true to everything else they make different about the Bible, they call it the golden calf. That it has to be a pure golden calf, and then sacrificed and burned to ash and whatever instead of a red heifer. So I don't know. I mean, you can see why there's war over there. These things are so divergent that it just creates an air of conflict.
And Stan, I have a question. I don't know if you saw the Pope or anything going on in the Vatican this weekend, but we have a question from a listener. It says, can you ask Stan about the satanic rituals at the Vatican Sunday? They were calling for Apollyon, the leader of the Locust Army, ?
I did see that video, and that was quite shocking to see that. Now, I'm trying to figure out if, A, the translation from Latin to English is correct, and B, if that was a meeting of what they said it was. I would be one of the first to say, oh yeah, okay, that sounds true to me, because the current Pope is also, in essence, the Pope of the Jesuits, the Black Pope, even though they have their own Black Pope. I mean, he's over him. And the Jesuits are not known for sticking strictly to the tenets of the Catholic faith, and certainly now that the Vatican's under their control, it is possible. I was worried by it because it's so openly, obviously evil that I was trying to figure out, to just be fair, if someone had put a false document up there, a false video, or hadn't translated right something. And I'm still, trying to figure out the truth of that particular thing. It was quite spooky, wasn't it?
Yeah, it definitely was. Has there ever been, the dual canonization in the conditions under which this was done, adding in, of course, the 3D aspect, it being transmitted in 3D. This obviously was, to me, looking at this from an investigative point of view, I have to wonder if there wasn't some sort of message being sent, covert and overt message being sent, or messages being sent. And I'm trying to think back in history, research back in history. Has there ever been I don't want to say a celebration, a ritual like this been done before with this dual canonization?
Yeah, this was a canonization.
I don't know. I don't think there has, but I'm not an expert on the Vatican history. But we do know that the Vatican popes have really acted somewhat like Caesars, and not exactly like Christ would have them do over the centuries. My family in France, in the Burgundy division of France, used to have lands and a family castle there, and they became Huguenots because they were Protestants, and the Catholic Church ran them off their land. So, and then they escaped to England and then to America to settle here in 1659. So we have a personal kind of lack of respect for the Vatican.
Yeah, it's personal for you, obviously. I mean, your family, that is, given the history. Wow, interesting. Interesting how that is. Yeah, we're going to be taking a very closer look at the entire ritual, at the frame by frame analysis of this, folks. Just as an FYI, and I know that others who specialize in this will be coming on and talking about this. But Stan, thank you for that.
Let me know if you get confirmation of the Latin translations. I mean, I could see parts of it were correct from what Latin I remember, but I just can't believe they would be so in your face about this. I mean, that's just amazing.
We're talking about a worship to, when you say Apollyon, essentially Nimrod. Are we not? The sun god, Osiris, that whole...
and to the morning star, to Lucifer. I mean, really, it's...
yeah.
That's why I just couldn't believe my eyes when I saw that. I thought, wow, this has got to be wrong. But, it needs to be investigated.
Very much so.
Even having the personal kind of negative feeling I have about the Vatican, I'm still trying to be fair about it and say, well, maybe that's just, a fake deal. But anyway, we'll see.
Well, thank you for adding that. Yeah, I've gotten a couple of emails about that, and again, to be fair, it takes a little bit of time for research and to take a look at the nuances and to make sure that not just the translation, but the context is well. I frankly I can't think of the context in which that would be used, but nonetheless, to be fully investigatively accurate, we've got to really spend some time looking at this. But thanks for that.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve. Or go ahead.
No, that's it.
All right. A couple of questions with respect to the earthquake or fracking and earthquakes. You had touched on this topic, Joe. I think I sent you. I'll just ask this. We've been hearing, and others have been hearing people saying that fracking is okay, and that earthquakes that some say are related to fracking are just merely releasing small amounts of pressure, and it's localized. It's not over. I mean, it's very local. It's almost as if it's being done as a favor as opposed to anything else. The downside is minimal, according to some of the proponents of fracking. And the small amounts of pressure, if not released, would build up and cause a bigger earthquake. Is there any logic to that?
Yeah, there can be. I know that over in West Australia, we had an American seismological team, a geophysical team, quote unquote, that was over there in about in the 80s, I think, mid to late 80s, and I had been given an intercepted transmission from Pine Gap, a classified thing. I had no point in telling how I got it, but the transmission did say that this team was there blasting tributary fault lines to a major fault line that would run down from the area where they were in the northwest, down through Perth, and that a Richter, 8-some-odd earthquake was building up pressure there for Perth, and that if they didn't, alleviate the stress by these little blasts that they were doing all along these tributary fault lines, that it could wipe out most of the buildings in Perth that were built pre-1979 or so, because they didn't have earthquake mitigation systems built into them, didn't think they needed them. So that, from a classified transmission and, verification by military, whatever, I believe did happen. So it does make sense that they would make small blasts to mitigate a bigger one forming. Now, if that's what they're doing that for in Oklahoma, what does that mean? That a big pressure is building? Is that the way we read that kind of an explanation?
Yeah, that's the other side of the coin.
I mean, yeah, I think there is. I've showed that on a number of graphs. In fact, some of them are still up there on the show images, 3 or 4 lines down. And you can see that we're getting, a lot of earthquakes in these zones that U.S., shows as fault lines and suspect areas for major earthquake activity. And, of course, one of those is right there in Oklahoma, right in the center of it. Another one is along Memphis, along the New Madrid. Another is in Savannah, in South Carolina, and then the other ones are known over on the West Coast up to the Juan de Fuca and California and somewhat west of the Rockies, things like that. But you can see on their maps, on the USGS maps, that we do have a lot of these quakes occurring in the area of Lawton and up toward some smaller areas around Oklahoma City. I'm just trying to see here between Oklahoma City and Tulsa. Yeah. So anyway,
the story hasn't changed since the last time that you were on. I mean, we're still it's consistent in terms of the earthquake threats, the minor rumblings, everything that we've talked about, everything you've talked about here. Well, over the past couple of months, I mean, nothing really has changed. We've seen the manifestation of the pressure with the earthquake, the recent earthquake activity in the middle of the country. But beyond that, I think what I hear you saying is, look, we're still holding the pattern here.
We are. I mean, we've had an earthquake that I've paid fairly close attention to, 6.6, back on the 23rd of this month, which was at Port Hardy, south of Port Hardy, on an extension of Canada to the west of Vancouver. And, that's so close to the top end of the Juan de Fuca plate that, and if you look at the way the plate dives down under that island, that you have to be concerned about it. It's there's activity there that I see is going to be a significant problem. We're also seeing a lot more earthquakes in Alaska, where the Aleutians join into the mainland there. And, we've seen all those down South America and then moving up to the Central America, up through southern Mexico. But now then, they're starting to appear up along our coast. And this is not a good thing. As I've said before, the pressure building up on the Juan de Fuca plate is in the neighborhood of a Richter 9 plus should it release. And if that goes, I think the shock wave that will travel through the United States will trigger a lot of other earthquakes that are this kind of pressure building up. I also have a report from a geologist whose name I withhold for his safety about Yellowstone and the deep bores they're doing there. And I'm wondering from some of the seismographs I've seen today if they are not trying to relieve pressure in Yellowstone as well. And then why are they running drills? Why has FEMA been running drills over the last year down the Mississippi and, down the Memphis area there where the New Madrid Fault is, running drills for taking care of a few million people and feeding them and clothing them and burying those that are hurt? Is it from something at Yellowstone blowing that way? Is it something from the New Madrid area itself? I don't know. But I just see too much happening here.
DHS implemented I forget what they're called, the NLE, something along those lines, some type of drill. They issued a report of damage, and they were guesstimating on different scenarios of what could happen. And one of those were the New Madrid fault lines. And they started, ever since they issued that report, they started running drills and scenarios as if there were going to be a New Madrid disaster. And in the major impact zones, they started running drills and doing different things that would appear they were preparing for something.
Yeah. And, if you look at the Lawton area, around Oklahoma City and north of there a bit, where these fracking quakes are coming from, that's not even on an area where there's a known fault line, but yet it's on the edge of the stable shield for North America, which anything kind of north and east of that shield line is relatively stable, but this is right on the edge of it going out to the unstable portions where they don't have to draw a fault line. It's just an unstable area. And it's moved down to Lawton, just north of the Red River there, as another potential earthquake zone. And this is off the USGS site. I'm not kind of figuring it. There's a small fault zone showing there near Lawton. We've done all we could, all of us that have talked about this for the last, 10, 12 years, about getting people ready for severe emergencies. And even James Lee Witt, that was the head of FEMA back in 2000, I think it was, 1999, 2000, said, look, guys, to the Americans, he said, you cannot depend on FEMA being able to manage more than two, and maybe only one great disaster at the same time. And if these all occur at once, several areas get triggered, whether it be, Yellowstone or whether it be all along the West Coast up to, Seattle. We're not going to be able to get supplies and people to you. We just will not have the manpower or resources or the access. And so that means that, and he told, county supervisors and stuff, look, you guys need to make up your own emergency help system and get ready to help your people locally, because we're just not going to be able to handle it. So when you get the head of FEMA saying that, and he was a good guy, he wasn't like going out to buy suits while a hurricane wiped out an area. He was really on top of the job and going around seeing people. And when he tells you that, you should listen. We've been telling people along with him, look, you need to get prepared. You need to do these things. And because when it happens, you're not going to be able to go to the store, the hardware store, the food store, or anything. You're not going to have fresh water, power, and that we're looking at these things forming now. And for whatever reason, they are happening. And I'm seeing these big quakes moving right up from Mexico, heading for the Baja at the tip of it, the top of it there, kind of west of the Salton Sea. And then when you see that 6.6 I was talking about just a few days ago, I think it was the 23rd, up in just above Seattle there at the little island off the coast of Canada. When you see that, then we're not wrong. It's moving up on our side of the ring of fire, and we need to do something. Prepare. And I've talked to some of our friends that live over in California and said, look, maybe all these prophetic warnings by various people about California breaking up into islands may be true. And they said, well, we can't move. And I say, well, look, I talked to one of my other friends over in Southern California, and she and her neighbors are sharing a boat that is dry docked in a guy's backyard. And the families are going to go get into it like a miniature Noah's Ark should the water encroach on them. So I said to these other friends, I said, well, look, I know this may sound flip, but why don't you get a rubber dinghy or something and a quick inflator and put that out the back so that if it's not a tidal wave, you might be able to just float out of there to the nearest land should this stuff happen. And, they thought, well, okay, maybe that's a good idea. I don't know. I hope we're all out of here by that time, but still.
Yeah, I get that. Stan, with the waning minutes we have left with your time tonight, anything that we haven't covered that on your radar that you think we should be focusing on that we haven't?
Let's see. Oh, just kind of an aside. The government is trying to make the shout radio or blog talk radio or radio like we're doing over the internet. They want to try to update legislation now then with a new one-page bill to analyze information on the use of telecommunications and like the internet and broadcast TV, radio, cable TV, public access, all the things that we normally use to share news. They want to be able to declare crimes of hate, and they don't say what the criteria are for crimes of hate. I mean, you might say, I disagree with Islam or the philosophy of it, or you might say, look, I want people to be followers of Jesus Christ and be saved. That could be construed as hate crime because you're preferring one faith over another, and this bill has some very nebulous terms that aren't well defined, which means they could take us off the air, they could take our websites down, they could put us in jail, they could confiscate our property because we are, frankly, terrorists committing crimes of hate. And I've looked at the bill, the new release from it. It's pretty general, and it's only one page long. And it was submitted by Senator Ed Markey, a Democrat from Massachusetts, and believe this, a Republican, Hakeem Jeffries, a Representative Hakeem Jeffries, a Democrat from New York. With a name like Hakeem, you got to wonder what his agenda are. But anyway, that is something that means that we're going to be running out of time for free speech like we're getting now, and for websites. And people ought to get as much information from us and down and act on it now as they can, because we may not be allowed to do anymore.
We covered that during the first hour, but
did you?
Yeah, but you know what? You said it very eloquently, much more eloquently than we did, I've got to say. And you're right. You know what, Stan? I'm not sure. Looking at this legislation and looking at and this is something that we touched on, looking at how the recent comments, and without regard to my feelings, your feelings, or whatever about the remarks of Clive and Bundy and how they were taken, to see, without regard to that, to see the discussion suddenly go from the actions of the BLM to that particular subject, and to see the whole situation managed and propagandized. We can see the writing on the wall, I think. I really believe that at this point we're looking at a very grave threat to our ability to speak freely, and not irresponsibly, but freely. And so, wow, yeah.
Well, we've seen that in the past, where they're going to consider veterans as a potential terrorist. They're going to consider fundamentalist Christians as potential terrorists, and they might take the word potential out. But when you start getting labeled like that for going to church with your fellow believers, I mean, that's serious. That is serious. Yeah,
and I don't think people really fully comprehend how cutting and how effective this could very well be in the quelling of our ability to tell the truth. Yeah, it's wow.
Well, I'm wondering how long we'll be able to sell, Holly's book and mine, because Holly's book's got a Christian cross on the back of it, the cover. not a big one, but it's there. And Cosmic Conspiracy, well, that's got like a lot of Christian stuff in it, and so that'll probably be a hate crime, just selling your books, no matter how you sell them, internet or mail order or what.
And that's, yeah, and we, it's almost surreal talking about this at this juncture, but yeah, here we are, and to hear it from someone of your stature, it's undeniable that it is a threat. So,
well, I've run over my time, guys. I do appreciate you letting me get on tonight.
Oh, it's gone fast. Stan, as always, thank you so very much for being so kind, sharing your time with us here on Tuesday. And I just want to say God bless you, God bless Holly.
Yeah,
folks,
thank you.
Dare to prepare and dare to prepare in Cosmic Conspiracy and Hagmann Report on this Tuesday edition, the 29th day of April 2014. This, of course, is a live broadcast, unless, of course, you're listening to this on the 30th or sometime in the future, in which case it's not a live broadcast. But now it is, and we're glad to be joining, or glad to be here in studio, Joe and I. We've got a lot of issues to cover as well during this hour. But we want to make a little bit of a comment about scheduling for this week. It was kind of funny because we had a pretty full schedule. We've been having pretty full schedules, and I've been getting a lot of emails about the various guests that we've had on, Chris Putnam and others. My goodness, I mean, over the last couple of weeks, if you look at the array of guests that we've had on and look at the messages that they've given, and Richard Hoagland on Friday, a lot of people said, "Oh, why would you? Why did it seem new age to me?" and so on and so forth. And there were a lot of different reactions to a lot of different guests, and it's interesting to see that happen. Well, we've got something special planned for you this Friday. There's something very special planned for you this Friday. Now, you've heard this gentleman at different times in an unscheduled format. You see, sometimes when we're talking about a critical issue, he'll come on and give us his 2 cents. But for the first time ever in a scheduled interview, we're going to be joined this Friday by our intelligence insider, W. We've had a lot of requests, folks, from people from all different countries, and especially in the United States and Canada, to have our intelligence insider come on and to explain certain things. A lot of requests, a lot of email requests. And I've had to actually, I shouldn't say beg him, but I've really asked him nicely if he would schedule a time to come on and to talk with you and to share his knowledge. And he has agreed to do so in a scheduled interview this Friday. So what I'd like everyone to do is certainly grab a family member, a friend, promote his appearance. To tell you about what he's going to be talking about is our intelligence insider. He goes by the initial W. We will introduce him that way. And he's going to tell you what he's going to be talking about on Friday. With that, welcome, W.
Hey, how you doing there, Doug?
Very well, sir.
I'm just here to tell everybody it's a secret. I can't tell you what we're going to talk about.
Yeah. The way today has been going, I believe that's what you do to me.
After we talked earlier today, I mean, I think every time I've been on the show, it's been a last-minute decision to come on for some reason, something pressing, and I don't know that we've ever planned more than a couple hours in advance ever that I'd come on and say anything. But certainly for example, the interview with Richard Hoagland last Friday, and some of the other interviews that you've done here over the last several months, that just ones that come to mind that might seem out of place for a Christian radio show or something like that, or maybe where we're just getting too involved in the world's stuff and not thinking enough about church stuff or something like that. And I think it might be time to try to pull all of these disparate themes together and try to make them make sense somehow, so that they so that we can see that there is a logic, a connectivity between all these various subjects that your audience needs to be paying attention to, and that will help them put what we're seeing going on in the world around us in context. And, you and I talked Sunday morning for a bit, and I think even there, as much as you and I have talked, did I plow new ground with you on Sunday? Did I stretch your mind a bit?
Yeah. In fact, folks, I just can't even begin to tell you the areas in which we touched upon, or the areas that we touched upon, and how far into what I would term how far into another dimension that we went into, another angle, another perception of events, and it was certainly an eye-opening conversation for me, well beyond anything you've ever spoken about before.
Well, and the reason that I did that, you and I have spoken, hundreds and hundreds of hours over many years on all sorts of current topics and subjects, etc., but it has taken literally that long to give you enough material so that you could weigh the things that I shared with you against the entirety of all that background. And the reason that's important is because, you grow to a certain point, and maybe you're a freshman, maybe you're a sophomore, maybe you've, got your degree in, and you got to go to, some post-college education and move to higher realms. Well, really, even for you personally, could we have had the conversation we had Sunday 6 months ago even?
I've got to say truthfully, no. I was not ready for it, and the disclosures you made, and that's kind of an odd word to use, but the information you provided, I suppose, is a better way to say it, really stretched my perception of events, both current and previous, and it also nudged my understanding. It forced me to look at things a little bit differently, and that's something that I think people get locked into this thought process, this comfort zone, this normalcy, this area of normal thought. Without looking, we talk about a multi-level chess game going on, for example. How many people have actually played, three-level chess or multi-level chess? I felt like I was involved in a game during that conversation, to give you an idea of the effect that you had.
And the reason I'm saying all of this for your audience right now tonight is I believe it's time that we stretch our minds and try to see the big picture, maybe bigger than you've ever really thought about before, except perhaps in some Hollywood movie or something. And even then, it's just a play on TV. It's a play on a movie screen. And reality is actually stranger than fiction. And I will say this, the matters that we'll discuss, when one particular individual was the wealthiest man on planet Earth, publicly known, the items that he wanted, that he traded a very important task for, even though he got paid for it, there was other issues that made it very risky. And he required a particular set of items in order to do that task. It was, at the time, it was the most expensive task ever undertaken by man in modern times. And those items have been in my possession for quite a number of years. and were conveyed to me. And it stretched my mind, forced me to stretch my mind, long before I actually received them. And the reason that I was given them was because I had actually grasped a lot of the concepts. I hadn't lost the ability to think outside the box. And then it was felt that I could, be trusted to convey at the right time those items, into the right hands moving forward into the future. And all of that to say that, I want to challenge our believer brother and sisters in this audience, and those that, don't have any, belief that God's actually out there or not. I don't think you're going to be disappointed at all. I think you're going to have a very interesting Friday. And we'll try to pull a lot of these authors together and these people that you've had on the show and these subjects, these ideas, these events going on all around us, and try to make them make sense. Sometimes you have to step back from the picture and think bigger. And even then, you might have to step back even further and think bigger. So Friday is going to be that opportunity. I hope I will be able to do justice to the subject matter. As you know, it took us quite a while going through it, but I had to build on other things you and I have talked about before. But I believe your audience has enough of the raw pieces that we can have this conversation and begin to crack the nut. And I don't know if we'll finish the conversation Friday, but we can at least begin to think again about all these subjects that we're being presented with and try to put them into the big picture and make all of them begin to make sense. This is critical. The timing is critical because world events are spinning out of control in many ways, and yet they're not out of control at other levels. They're going exactly where somebody wants them to go, has designed them to go. And if we are going to be able to stand during this time, we sort of need to know which way the tide's going and what's going on around us. It's like standing on the beach and the water's coming in or going out, and you kind of change your stance so the water doesn't suck the sand out from underneath you and tip you over. Got to know which way to lean. So I hope to challenge folks in their faith, and for some people, maybe we'll throw a few fish bones in there, and if we do, the only other thing I ask is that if it's something that is hard to deal with, just pick it out, set it on the side of your plate. Don't choke on it, but it is going to be a very roller coaster ride. I hope that we'll do the subject matter justice.
Folks, judging from our conversations over the last 72 hours and going back into the last, 2 years, you've never failed to disappoint. You really have the classic ability to connect the dots and to make things that personally, for me personally, having studied before, bring issues to clarity, to better clarity and better focus. And to see how a Tom Horn and Chris Putnam could join together and the information be consistent with the information provided by Steve Quayle and others, even Richard Hagmann, for example, in his findings, and Nathan Leal and his observations, and others that we've had on. So it's going to be kind of like a summary, a PhD level summary, I believe, but reduced to a consumable, coherent discussion. And that's what you've got a gift of being able to do that. If you can, I'll tell you this: if you've got patience with me, and if you can get me to understand the concept, then I am positive that our listeners will just be absolutely impressed by your ability to create the mental images and the mind pictures sufficient to get them to understand the bigger picture. So I'm excited for Friday. It's going to be a great program.
Yeah, everybody show up on Saturday. It'll be all over with. Saturday.
I'm
looking forward to it. Yeah, you started to say Saturday. I was like, okay, well, that'll be an interesting way that works out. Well, everybody show up Saturday, and then it'll be all over. I'm looking forward to it. I'll be prayerfully considering, how to say these things as concisely as possible. I mean, I could, as you know, I could drone on for 20, 30 hours and probably not really repeat myself on these items, but I think I can get us started and help put some of these things into context and make some level of sense. What I'm really trying to do here, Doug and Joe, is to prod all of your listeners to think about the big picture and kind of get in their mind why what's happening is happening, what's really behind all these things. You peel back the layers of the onion, and it's not that it's not still an onion. It's just different layers. It doesn't go from onion to apple to pear or peach. It's still an onion. It's when we were talking about what to call the show, well, it's the truth is different also at every level. And so as we peel away these things that are happening, there's certain truths there, but there's some deeper truths about what we're facing and why. And just like the deceptions that we're facing, there's deeper reasons for some of these deceptions. And so I think the thing that's in my mind in doing this is the last thing I'll say for your listeners for prepping for Friday, is that certainly there was some discussion and some consternation among some of the listeners about what Richard Hoagland had to say and some of his conclusions that he may have drawn. Well, we might have different conclusions, but the data points are the data points. We can argue as to the validity of some of them. And Richard makes a very interesting case, but I can tell you long before there was Richard Hoagland, these matters were being discussed in other ways, and it's a very important series of discussions. And that piece that he had presented Friday is an important piece in all of these pieces going into the picture, whether it's Nathan Leal, whether it's Pastor Langford, it's Steve Quayle, it's all of those pieces actually fit in their own way, and I'm going to try very hard to get several pieces of the puzzle on the table in the proper place and at least add a little more clarity to the picture, because we are in those times when the picture is starting to come into focus and we need to be able to begin to see clearly and see ahead and anticipate what's ahead, not be stunned, surprised, subject to the shock and awe that somebody intends for us to be captivated by and confused by, distracted by at this critical moment. So I hope that's enough of a teaser that your listeners will listen Friday and as I said, I've only done 2 interviews where I pre-planned it more than a day or two, and one of them was Caravan to Midnight's interview, and one for one other host that I did. And other than that, I really don't, pre-plan them. But after our talk today, Friday's a good day. Let's see if we can't make sense of this, and I'll look forward to it with your listeners. And I hope that they will come with hearts and minds ready to, consider. They don't have to agree. They don't have to whatever. I'll give them the information, and they'll have to make their own decision. But at least consider these subjects and chew on them and rechew on them. And I guarantee they'll be coming from my perspective as a Christian with an end times perspective, but also as a scientist and a physicist, and as a detective.
Very good. Now, for a homework assignment, we had discussed this. You had suggested that people read the article, the column, Life as an Investigator is Like a Box of Chocolates. It's available on the front page of our website. You still on board with that? You got to read that to really prep yourself for the show?
Anybody that doesn't read that thing 3 times before Friday, don't even show up for class. Okay, and bring a pencil and a piece of paper. And the only reason I say that is because I'm not going to dwell on a number of things, but there may be a couple quick references I do just so we don't get bogged down if people want to go do a little extra research on some subjects, and I'll give a few key things where maybe they can go and look at stuff. And, I will say this too, Steve Quayle's book dealing with transhumanism, he started it out with that article, and the subject matter is every bit as important to this conversation. And again, I will tell you this, and of course I mentioned even with what Stan was talking about at the space station and the movies, 2010, great movie. There is so much here that actually is very tied together with this discussion we'll be having Friday. It's an important discussion. It is as critical as reading Daniel to know what's coming up in the end times, as critical as reading Revelation, because you have to understand what those authors were trying to tell you about what was just ahead, and fit it into the themes as you and I discussed. And did we talk a lot of Scripture and Bible over the last 7 months and again on Sunday in this conversation? Of course we did, because it's right there in the Scriptures. The Scriptures are very clear on some of this stuff, but you have to think just a hair further and read between the lines, if you will. Not that it's not, somewhat obvious, but you have to stretch your mind to realize, who is being written to and why. The Proverbs says that wisdom is to be sought after like fine gold. And so we have to sift some of these things and see if we can find some fine gold, some nuggets even, that give us a better understanding of where we're at right now and what our part, each one of us individually, is in what's just ahead.
All right, my friend. Looking forward to a great Friday show, and I want to thank you for your time. I know it's given what all you're involved in. I know it's really it's a rough deal for you to commit that level of time, that amount of time. But I want to thank you for it, and looking forward to it. So, folks, read Life as an Investigator is Like a Box of Chocolates on HomelandSecurityUS.com. And with that, my friend, we will talk on air on Friday.
All right. Looking forward to it. I hope all of your listeners show up. Looking forward.
I do too. God bless you, my friend. We'll talk soon. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Good night.
All right. We're going to move on to calls of people who have been patiently waiting. 940, we're going to come to you first. Thanks for holding. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. What's on your mind tonight?
940, you're up. Going once, 940. I can hear you. You're up, 940. All right, let's move on.
We'll come back to you. 724, you're up next. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Oh, I apologize. I actually
weren't ready, huh?
Yes. I'm actually not far from y'all, and I just moved back here from Missouri. But I've heard a lot about you guys. I know that you're up where alma mater is, Edinburgh. So it's just great to hear so much information. I wanted to let you know, I heard you on Paul Bagley, and I have been pretty shaken by the events that I've seen the last probably 3 months. Now, it's not to say that the last couple years hasn't been a little nerve-wracking, to say the least, but when I heard you, you gave me such a reassurance with your calm, like, just even keel demeanor. So I have to tell you, thank you so much, and I look forward to listening to you guys more.
Well, that's an awful nice compliment. Thank you so much. And you know, the wrong time to get all excited and is when you're in the thick battle. And I think we're kind of in the thick of an information battle right now, and we have to get through it. So, what a nice compliment. Thank you so much.
You're definitely dealing with the heavy-duty topics, and I think most of us who don't know how to consume all this all at once. So we try to get as much, and I heard you on Alex Jones, so I know that you guys are obviously doing a real good job at explaining that, because I think that's where the information is. It's the alternative media. Sadly, I think, and I'm sure you are observers of this, but social media is turning their back on a lot of the alternative news. It's just, right now it's just, you can't get past the headline stories, and the back stories are probably more important than the headlines itself. So I appreciate you guys digging deeper.
Well, by definition, that is really the ultimate goal and objective, or the objective, I should say, of an investigative journalist. So we're investigators and we're journalists. So there you go. Well, thanks for the call.
There you go.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right, God bless.
Have a great night.
All right, moving along.
740. We're coming to you next. 740. Last one was 940.
Hey, Dustin, Jester from Ohio. Hey,
good evening.
Great show, mate, guys. Good evening.
Thanks, bud.
Hey, I'm listener. I've called him a few times before. I was just wondering if it's on your guys' minds, is it possible that the bankers could eventually sell the bomb down the river when they're, eventually? It sounds like she had a few stories in the news today where it came out of the Benghazi thing today where they're tracking it to the White House, and it seems like Joe posse are getting close to him. And do you think it's likely they'll sell him down the river, or that he'll most likely have some kind of event to kind of block it out from the news or anything?
That's an interesting. That's a very interesting question, and I think we have to look at what's happening with the bankers and the politicians, including and especially the highest level, and that being in the executive branch. Could there very well be a plot afoot with respect to the bankers against the executive branch, or in collusion with the executive branch? It's one or the other, in my view. And I think it's the latter. I think that they're in collusion. Could they sell the executive branch, Obama and his cohorts down the river? I kind of doubt it. I think that they're all working in collusion with one another. Yeah. Now, that's not but then again, you know what? You raise an interesting question, too, because there are things that are taking place that don't seem to fit a certain particular pattern that one would expect. And I think that I think Obama could be Obama's a figurehead. Yeah.
They'll go whichever way they need to pivot to. I have a little bit of a theory where they know they're gonna have a hard time going for the guns and all that, and then they could release a virus, or they could do any of those things, and it's just we know the patterns, we know what they're just gotta watch what they're propagandizing, and it's kind of basically all you can do. But, I can throw one other question.
Sure.
After you go ahead. I was wondering, go ahead.
No, sorry about the delay. There's a few second delay here, and I think it's because of the weather. So you go ahead and ask your question.
I don't know if Stan was still there, but I was wondering if if we'll see a huge uptick in maybe discoveries of fossils that predate pre-flood time, where they could propagandize to say, I saw an article today that they said they found the 1,000-year-old Bible without any mention of Jesus in it. And more specifically, I was more interested in the Human Genome Project kind of thing. I was wondering if you hear anything about that. But then the whole idea of they're building up the propaganda for bringing us along on the trip for the alien disclosure type of stuff and that type of thing.
Oh boy, you got to listen to Friday. Because your questions, I think, will be answered. That's one of the topics that we discussed with our intelligence insider, who has an understanding. Don't forget the overlap between the intelligence world and other areas that include what you're referencing. So,
I find that highly interesting.
Yeah,
I think we'll see a lot of that. But
I can't disagree with you, my friend. Well, thanks for the call. We appreciate that. Thanks for putting up with that delay. All right, buddy. You take care, man.
Have a good night.
All right.
Next, we're going to take a call from BP Earthwatch. She's the one who asked a question about the Vatican ceremony on Sunday, and we're going to go to him. He has made a YouTube video about it. BP, it's good to have you on the show.
Hello, Joe and Doug. How are you tonight?
Very well. Good to talk with you.
Great. I've been watching your show for a long time, guys. Never called in. I appreciate you taking the time. I'll try to be brief. I just had a couple things to say about the ceremony this Sunday on the 27th. And first of all, let me say thank you to Stan Dio. Excellent information from it, as always. But Doug and Joe, did any of you guys watch that ceremony?
I watched clips of it between your video and I saw Reverend Michelle Hopkins made a video with the transcription from the Latin to the English.
And I've got a full DVD copy of the ceremony that I have not gone through yet, but I do have it. So, we've got all bases covered. What's your take on it?
Well, now, I didn't. Someone asked me, did I translate it? And no, I didn't. I don't know Latin, but what I did was saw what it did. I saw what they were doing in the King James Bible in Revelation 9. And I'm an electrical engineer, but I've studied many sciences for the last 35 years. And for 30 years, I've studied the Greek and Hebrew of Bibles from the King James, translating it back and going back and changing it. But it was a major milestone. And what we saw was Revelation 9 again. And it has to do with starting out with the breastplates. It says, and they had breastplates, and it was as it were breastplates of iron, and the sounds of wings, and the sounds of chariots, and many horses running to battle. Now, the only time that breastplates have ever been mentioned is in the Old Testament when they were building the Levitical breastplates for the priests. Remember how they described them, and they had the 12 jewels on them, and the gold, and the gold rings, and the way they were hung. Well, down that it's no longer a beautiful ornament like that. It is a breastplate of iron. But what it does is signify to us that, because it's the only other time that breastplates have been mentioned, is that this locust army, which is what they're talking about, is coming from false preachers and teachers. Breastplates signify priesthood. Now, what we saw on Sunday, again, I didn't translate any Latin. I don't know. Again, that must have been Reverend Michelle. But Revelation 9 tells us that they had crowns of gold and faces of men. And that's exactly what we saw. But they had the strip of flesh from John, I think the 23rd, in John Paul, they had the vial of blood. And that's an ancient satanic witchcraft ritual called raising the dead or calling the dead back. And what they did, the witch of Endor, guys, if you remember, they called back the spirits so they could prophesy to them. In other words, to try to gain knowledge of the future. But what happened, we saw that. Now, the reason I know that is exactly what they did, because it says, we're talking about the locust army in Revelation 9. It says, and they have a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue, his name is Apollyon. Now, all through the Vatican, there are statues of Apollyon. And Apollyon in the Greek was the sun god. He had the chariot that would pull the sun from the east to the west each morning. That was his deal. But now they actually moved the obelisk that's in the center of St. Peter's Square from Egypt. And it is the temple, and it is the obelisk that was built for Ra, the sun god. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, you see now. So, and today I did a video updating it called "The Pope's Magic Circle." And now I'm a Baptist, Southern Baptist, believe in Jesus Christ, no matter what anybody says. That's what I believe in. But what they did was they called forward for the opening of the bottomless pit. And Joe and Doug, you've got so much information that's coming in now. But I want to send a warning from the wall, is that there's wars and rumors of wars, and there are distractions. There's a lot of different things that are happening, or distractions away from this locust army that has moved. And what's going to happen is this. Because if you'll watch the video about what was done about between the satanic ritual and the magic circle, it shows that the St. Peter's Square is an identical match to many satanic witchcraft circles that call in demons. And what because they're worshiping Apollyon and Ra, the Egyptian sun god, who they believe that's inside that obelisk in the center of this circle, they're opening up the pit for the locust army. And that's what happened. So all of the things that we're talking about, I watched the comets and the sun and the solar flares and the earthquakes, and they're very important. But nothing is more important to realize that now, because of what happened Sunday, there's going to be an evil spirit that overcomes the preachers that are not aware of what has happened. In other words, we're told that this will happen, this great falling away. And that's what's happening. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I apologize for interrupting, but I do have a question, and you might or may not be familiar with this, and I'm not sure if I'm accurate on this. I was doing some research, and even in the Bible reading, I think they talk about the dimensions of, somewhere it talks about the dimensions of the Tower of Babel. And if I'm not mistaken, it says that some of the historians, or the conclusions are that some of the historians are wrong in their making of it, and that it was actually more of an obelisk type, shaped type tower. Do you know if that's true or not?
Well, it very well could have been, because we really don't have any accurate records of that. But in a way, it was symbolic of escaping the wrath of God, regardless, because after the Great Flood and things like that. But listen, I've seen so many things that are kind of steered in that direction, like the Ark of the Covenant and searching for that. But in Revelation, it tells us that the Ark of the Covenant is in heaven with God. If you read it, it tells you that. It was, when the great thunders and all, and it's open, that's where the Ark is. But Joe and Doug, the distractions are 99.9% of what we're seeing. What I'm saying is this: we are at the end of days. Now we have the false preachers that are going to pounce upon everyone almost simultaneously. And what you're going to have to watch for is this: anger with questions, falling away from the true word. And here's one of the things that we saw with Kenneth Copeland, the Pope, and Tony Palmer, the Protestant priest that's now joined the Catholic Church, is saying that we all are now one religion. It's okay. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Don't sweat the details. But the devil's in the details. And they're saying, don't worry about your doctrine. These are going to be clues. Don't worry about the doctrine. Just come and be saved. The doctrine is everything that separates us from worshiping Christ and Antichrist. So here's the major move after 30 years of research, from fallen angels to demons to everything else. We are at the door of the locust army, and they are open. It's open, and they are here. And if no one realizes it, the whole world will be deceived.
All right.
Very, very well said.
Just one thing about the Vatican, about the Pope. One of the things that I noticed, the papal coat of arms, and it's been tradition for the Pope to have a coat of arms. And if you look at, and this is just one of many things, if you look at the coat of arms of Benedict XVI and John Paul II, and so on and so forth, it's interesting that you find a scallop, okay, which the shape of the scallop of a scallop. Now, in occult tradition, and this is important, this is a case where it doesn't matter what we believe as Christians. It matters what the opposition, the enemy to Christians, believe, only because it's their thought process, obviously. But did you know that in the occult tradition, the scallop is the symbol of Lucifer? And now people might say, oh, wait a minute, it's just a decorative piece or whatever. Well, no, when you create a coat of arms, it's every symbol used has a meaning. And occult writings teach that, the scallop has this association with Lucifer and, of course, Aphrodite, Venus. A picture, as a matter of fact, well known, coming out of a seashell being born into existence in the same way that, we'll say, Buddhism teaches Buddha was born. Okay, for example, I'm just using that as an example. So, occult writings teach us that Venus, for example, is considered to be Lucifer, and this by numerous theologians and intellectuals. Just given that one little piece of information, you can see the depth of deception. I'm not saying that. What I'm not saying is this is in fact directly related to what we saw take place, but we've got to understand that symbols and words have meanings, and rituals are done for a purpose, and it's what's that?
That talisman. That's one of the things the Pope used very heavily. All the things and that's an ancient symbol of witchcraft, Doug, is these talismans. And if you notice, if you'll go back 3 popes, that they used to have like a little belt buckle that had the 12 jewels of the ancient Levitical priesthood. Then Pope Benedict changed that to a cross of gold because it was becoming obvious to the Jewish priesthood that they were trying to mimic them. All right, so they have changed that gold buckle that had the 12 jewels. Now Pope Francis changed what Benedict had changed to a cross of iron to a cross of gold. Of iron, the breastplate of iron. And that's what it's saying. It is happening before our eyes, and people they better watch out, because preachers that you thought you could trust are going to be all of a sudden taken in for various reasons. They're going to be deceived. The evil spirits are moving, Joe and Doug, and they're going to be leading everyone to this great deception of the end time. We are at that. And I'm going to say this, it no longer matters when I report about the comets and the asteroids and all that. That's daily happenings, and I will continue to do it. But nothing matters more than this movement of this locust army of false priests. It's happening now. It started with this ritual Sunday. Each feast day of the Jewish traditions, you'll see another thing happen. We saw just before Passover, we saw the collapse of this world stock markets, including the gold. That was the overturning of the money changers' tables before Christ went into Passover. That started at each festival this year. You're going to see different things happening. But right now, watch everything the men you trust do. That's just the way it is. There's no way to get around it. That's the great deception. Satan will deceive the whole world at the end. And he's going to do it how? Not through armies and wars, but through preachers that appear to be holy. And I say everything I say out of love for my fellow human beings, not to anger anyone. And I get plenty of people mad at me. But listen, I'd rather them be mad at me and snatch a few back out of the fire.
Well,
you know what I'm saying? Then just go along with the game plan. I'm not built that way. I can't do it.
No, I agree with that, and I think that you're not saying just preachers, pastors, of course, will be.
No.
You're saying that of course the greatest deception comes from within. Look at all nations that have fallen. Look at all organizations, even corporations that have fallen. It's usually somebody from within that has been, or people from within, as catalysts for the fall.
That's right.
What's that?
The Judas factor.
Right. Correct. So yeah. It does make perfect sense that that's where the deception will be the greatest or the most effective.
Exactly where you're not looking from it.
Right.
Anti in the Greek is instead of, instead of Christ. So if your church is doing all of these great things, plays and musicals and presentations and video, but they never quite get around to teaching the Word of God. You get 2 or 3 verses a day or on a Sunday from the Word of God, it would take you 600 years to get through it. It's called instead of God, Antichrist. But now the movement, because of the release Sunday, is going to be so critical. Listen, since Sunday, I've watched a few preachers change. And I'm very serious about this. Very, very serious.
Okay.
Something is moving across this globe right now. Something is happening, Joe and Doug. And this warning needs to be very carefully looked at, analyzed, and if you see that maybe I'm right, please continue broadcasting about this warning, because there's no greater warning. No nuclear bomb, no war, nothing from Russia, nothing from Korea that will. And they would love for us all to be looking for a plane in the bottom of the ocean that is not there.
Well,
then looking at what Satan is doing to us now.
Very good, sir. You have had the distinction of closing us out on this Tuesday program. Sir, thank you very much for your call. We appreciate it. God bless.
Thanks,
Stay
BP.
safe.
We look to talk to you again soon.
Yes, absolutely.
God
Folks,
bless you, and God bless everyone that's watching.
All right. That'll do it for tonight, folks, this Tuesday edition. Don't forget Friday. Special Intelligence Insider 3 hours. This is going to be a great show. Also, in preparation for that, you've got to read Life is Like a Box of Chocolates. Life as an Investigator is like a box of chocolates. I'll put that up on the front page once again in preparation for Friday's show.
And with that, we're going to call it a night. Friday, Intelligence Insider. Sunday, Steve and Pastor Langford. And we might have another guest pop in this week. We'll let you know tomorrow at the latest. With that, God bless, stay safe, have a great night.